The Silent Intelligence.
I'd like to introduce Qaizar Hassonje from Adidas. If you could talk a little bit more about what you do at Adidas, that would be great.
Yeah, most definitely, Daniel. So I'm with Adidas. I've got a new role as Senior Director for Partnerships and Business Development. Up till now, I was managing the innovation for the digital sports business. And my history is like I had a startup company that I co-founded called Textronics Inc., which got bought by Adidas. That's how I came to Adidas.
Excellent.
Prior to that, I was with DuPont for a number of years. So it tells you how old I am now. I've been in the industry for quite some time. But particularly in the wearable industry for the last 10 plus years.
Excellent, excellent. I didn't realize there was a wearable industry 10, 15
That
years
is
ago.
true. It was not called wearable at that time,
That's
right?
true.
Yeah.
It's the same like IoT or machine to
Correct.
machine.
Yeah.
So what excites you today most about the wearable space?
Yeah. So when we were in the wearable space about 10 years ago, as I was mentioning earlier, we had to kind of do everything. We had to start from the basic ingredients, the materials that we had, build the sensors, build the connections to it, build the whole system all the way to the full experience, right? The nice thing is, like in the last 10 years, it has evolved to a point where you get a lot of these components already available, right? So the barriers to entry for somebody is much lower, and what that means is the consumers are going to have a lot more choices. There will be some confusion with a lot of this, but that is okay. The consumers will have a lot of choices. It will flush out better in terms of the best user experience, the best system, the best device wins, and that is actually going to be great for the overall wearable industry. And I think it's a long-term play. It's not like a short-term play, and it's still in its infancy. Even so, it's like 10 years now. It's still in its very much infancy, but at least it is more of a business today than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. So is your team doing both hardware and applications?
Yeah, so for example, particularly I talked about the My Coach Elite Team system. My team built the whole thing from the sensors, the textile sensors, the electronics, the hardware, the analysis, the experience. So that was actually, and the RF, the wireless communication, the user interface. So that was like 7 or 8 different specialties and functions coming together, right? Now, we had a core group inside, right, Adidas, and then we hired some of the expertise from outside and brought it all together.
Excellent. So, to your earlier point that it became so much easier to launch products or get to market, how would you say, how much did it shrink? What did it used to be from a conception till you get a product to market, and what it is now in terms of time?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that it has shrunk that significantly. What it has done is the ability for people to focus on one thing as opposed to the whole thing, right? So, for example, I don't have to now sign up to do the full ecosystem, right? Okay.
Right.
I can do my own thing, and my own thing could be a better hardware, or my own thing could be a better experience, or a combination thereof, right? Okay. So it helps me focus on what I do best, as opposed to trying to do a lot more than what I have to.
Excellent.
And in the sense, then I can put my same amount of effort in making that as good as possible and make it better.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what kind of partners do you work with or do you look for?
So it depends. So when we were building this whole system, we were looking at the right partners on the hardware side, the software, the user interface, the database side, right? We pretty much did most of the smart apparel part in-house because that was the core capability that we had, right? Okay. But then we have our own hardware engineers, but we also looked externally, right? So in the sensors, so we're not going to create our own sensors, but we are looking at what is the best sensor available externally in the marketplace that we want to bring it together, as an example, right? But now the good news is, like, I mean, there are companies who bring these sensors already together, right? Including some of the digital signal processing that's already built in, some of the microprocessors that are together. So instead of buying and getting individual components, now you can have sub-assemblies that makes life a little bit easier.
Excellent. Did you hear the keynotes this morning?
I heard some parts of it.
Did you hear the Samsung keynote about their new platform?
So I have actually heard the Samsung keynote before, not today, right? In terms of how they're bringing the whole farm. So that is amazing. So, like, I mean, as I was mentioning earlier in one of my talks, just within the sports and fitness part, right? There are so many multiple ecosystems, right? Okay. And then forget about sports fitness versus automobile versus home, because then they're separately. So the key thing is like, how does these ecosystems now come together, right? At least from a consumer perspective, right? Because I'm not going to keep my data for what I do on the field separate from what I do on the automobile, separate from what I do in the home. It has to all converge for me to make the most out of it.
That makes sense.
That's my feeling.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with you. So, what advice can you give to inspiring companies in the wearable tech? What should they focus on today to maybe potentially partner with Adidas or just get more traction in the wearable space?
So particularly with Adidas, I mean, we were at one time doing as much as we could in-house. We have now sort of embraced the open source part of it, right? Where we are looking to see how we can partner, and that is actually my role for digital sports. Like, how do we partner with people so that we can together bring things sooner, faster, with speed, and better experiences, right? And even though we have our own ecosystem where we have the ability of doing from soup to nuts, we are really looking to see how we can enhance that capability with other partners, right? And it could be both. It could be on the hardware side for sure, but it could also be on some of the experiences side, some of the analysis side, right? Because we don't know and do it all ourselves, right? So that is actually a great opportunity, particularly for like other companies coming into the business. I mean, this is about as good as a time as any, right? I mean, I would certainly say it's like a lot better time now than what it was 10 years ago, right? I give some example of a lot of people came in 10 years ago and just faded away because it was just not the right time. I mean, I don't know if there's ever a right time, but this is certainly a lot better than it was 10 years ago for startups to come. And what they need to do is like they need to find what their specialty is, what their passion is, and then focus on that, because there are a lot of other components available that they can marry up with, right? Okay. I mean, if you've got the wherewithal to do it all, great. I mean, we did that, right? But what we had to sacrifice is, like, for example, when we first came into this thing with smart apparel, we were looking at all verticals, like medical being the big one, right? But military, first responder being the other one, industrial being the other one, sports being the other one, but you cannot do it all, right? But now there may be a possibility where you do these things really good. It can actually go to others where others who are vertical champions who can actually integrate that. We are actually like that for sports. We are more like the integrators for sports because we want to bring the right experience for sports.
Excellent.
As an example,
What about data ownership and data privacy? So you're collecting a lot of data. Who owns this data, and how do you make sure there's a control over the data?
So it's actually really three things, right? It is like data ownership, data privacy, and data security, right? If you go separate that. So in terms of data ownership, like, I mean, in most of the cases, the consumers own the data, right? And whenever you sign up to something, somewhere you check a box saying that it is okay to do that, right? Okay. And then from our standpoint, when we work with teams and athletes, okay, so we want to make sure that we have access to data, at least for R&D purposes, to make things better, right? But together with the teams or the athletes, and it's like all individual cases, right? Okay, we want to see how we could enhance the value of data for them, right? Either in terms of performance or in terms of entertainment, media, fan engagement, because they are both great opportunities, right? And then we continue to do that, right? Then in terms of data privacy, right? Okay, so data privacy is very key to us personally, right? And you will only exchange it when you get something value of it. I have this anecdotal example that I typically give, like, for example, me and my wife are traveling from Chatsford to Connecticut, right? Where my daughter-in-law is, right? And then in terms of direction, I mean, I'm driving, so I ask her to say, like, get Waze and use that, right? And she does that. She gets Waze, she does that. But when the Waze asks us, like, do you want to share your location? She says no, because of data privacy. And what direction do you get? Nothing, right? so this gives you nothing. Like, I mean, you'll have to share your location if you want to know where to go, right? Okay.
That's very true.
Very simple. So the value that she got out of that in terms of knowing that, and she was willing to give up some privacy in terms of location. And that's the choices that we make. And I think we'll continue to make those choices where we see more value to it. And then the last thing about security, I mean, security is key. I mean, with Adidas particularly, we want to make sure the data is as secure as possible, right? And one of my frustration, if you will, was when we bring the Elite system out, is the amount of time it took us to make sure the data is secure, right? And the limitations that we had in terms of putting it to the cloud and all that, which I did not have as much appreciation for until we got to that project and that part of it. And in hindsight, I agree, is like, okay, so we want to make sure it's about as secure as possible. That's my opinion on all of those three things.
So if you could say the top things in the industry overall that are holding things up, if any, in the wearable tech?
What are there? Yeah. So at the very highest level, right, it is somehow the battery, the power that is needed, right? Okay, and then you always have to make a trade-off, right? Because you want it to be as small as possible, as ubiquitous as possible. The less time you charge, the better off you are. But then you want it to last as long as possible. Also, at the same time, you want it to store as much data, right? Okay, so for example, when we were doing the Elite system, is 1 hertz data okay versus 10 hertz data versus we were getting some of the ECG data at 200 hertz, right?
Right.
Now, we want to get as granular as possible because there are certain things that you know what you want to do with it today, but you don't know what more is possible, right? So you want to store all of that, right? Okay. But then you have to make all of those choices, right? Again, so from that perspective, like if there's a way to get it more energy efficient, energy harvesting, all of those actually are good things. The second thing is about connectivity, right? Okay. The simpler, the easier, the smoother it gets, the better off people are. I mean, that's some of the frustration in terms of like, how does it connect here versus other, because we want to be mobile, it's all wireless. How can it be about as seamless as possible? Because it all impacts the experience that we get, right? Okay. And then obviously things that we do really good is like, how do we take data to analyze and insights? I think insight is going to be the most important thing, and we're going to do the best we can in terms of insight for sports, fitness, going into wellness and well-being. But there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there, because now these sensors are becoming very inexpensive, a lot of data, right? But just data is not going to cut it. Is the insights, how you get from data to analysis to insight. That's actually going to be the key.
Yeah, I very much agree with it. I was going to follow up on some of the things that you said and ask you some more technology questions. So today, most of those wearable devices, they need a phone to communicate with it, right? But
right.
Especially if you go exercise, in a lot of cases you don't want to take your phone along. So what do you think? Do you think those devices eventually going to figure out a way how to go to the cloud directly, or do you think you will always need to have some kind of a hub?
It's actually not in the future. It's already there, right? Okay. So if you remember my presentation, I talked about the smart run watch, smartwatch. Right? It is designed for a runner, right?
All right.
In that case, it has GPS, it has connectivity, it has everything, right? So you do not need your smartphone.
Right.
So you wear the smart run.
Cellular?
Yeah, you wear the smart run and you just go, and that's it. You don't need anything else for that, right? Okay. So that is actually happening, and I mean the smartphone is a good thing, right? I mean I don't mean to say it's like it's not a good thing, right? Okay, but then there are choices you want to make. There are certain places you want your smartphone, right, for other reasons, security reasons or connectivity for other reasons, and there are certain places you would rather not, right? And the good news is there are choices available, and there will be more choices available, and we bring those choices as well. I mean some of our devices need a smartphone, some of our devices do not, right? And there'll be an opportunity and option for people to choose from.
And what you say, based on your experience, how much bandwidth do you really need for the data that you're getting from those sensors?
As much as possible, right? I mean,
so you still, but you don't sending video and audio signals.
No,
you're only sending the
true,
sensor.
that is true. So in some extent, the experience that you can bring right now is limited by bandwidth, right? Because you somehow try to optimize it all the time, and we do that all the time as well, right? Okay.
But it's also to your earlier point that you're trying to save on power. And,
exactly. So those are trade-offs.
So my question is actually targeted towards: is it possible to address the needs with wearable tech with a very, very low bandwidth technologies, but much higher power?
Yeah, and I think the answer is yes. And there are devices that do that today as well. It's like very low bandwidth, minimal information, but you don't have to charge it for 6 months, right? Single battery, and that's it, right? Okay. And we actually also do both, right? Okay. And then from the elite level, you want to have as much granularity, as much data. Okay, that's fine, right? Okay. And that is, I think, the beauty of wearable today is like it's not one size fits all anymore, right? Because of the options that you have. Now, ideally, you have all the data that you want, all the bandwidth that you want, and don't have to charge it at all, right? But it will be a while before we get there, right? But then in that period, there are choices. But today also, there are devices and experiences available on both ends of the spectrum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed talking. Do you have any parting comments? Any that you want to mention?
Okay, so I mean, obviously I've got this passion for wearable, right? I mean, we've been in this field personally for more than 10 plus years when wearable was not a term coined, right? I see this opportunity to continue to grow, right? And I think today is a lot better than what it was 10 years ago. We were all concerned about where it is going to go, how we're going to make money, but now there are good models in terms of how to make money, and there are not so good business models in terms of you have the best technology, but you can't make money out of that, right? Okay, but then all of those are out front in front of us. Like it views us to choose that properly. I mean, some of it is judgment calls in terms of which one goes better than the other, but it's a lot easier today than it was, I would say, 10 years ago, right? And I think there'll be a lot more people coming in there. There'll be a little bit of confusion, a little bit of chaos, but that is okay because it's all going to lead us to a better place. That's my point of view.
Qaizar.
The Silent Intelligence. Learn more at www.thesilentintelligence.com.